Hello, this video is for my sculpture students to play around with your supplies and your tools. I'm hoping that you had a chance to open everything up and to explore your supplies, open up your tools. If you haven't had an opportunity to find a container for slip, please also write slip on it, this way to eliminate possibly getting thrown out. I did also find a fork and a spoon. I don't have, a knife and a spoon. I unfortunately couldn't find a plastic fork, but if you have one, that will come in handy. Some of my tools are kind of all around. I did open up a cardboard box. Feel free to use your bags as a tablecloth. So you should have 3 bags. If you wanted to take one of them and open it up to protect your table, that would be perfectly fine to use. That's why I gave you 3 of them. So if you felt like you wanted to use one as a tablecloth, you could certainly open it up to protect your area. The first thing I want to do before you do anything, before you get any clay out, is obviously to prepare and sort of explore your materials. If you can find a nice place to keep your tools, not a bad idea. So I do have my texture tub, but I also have a milk crate over here behind me, and I have this container just to kind of keep things in. So I have a place for all of my tools. So know that. The first thing I want to do is show you how to make your wire cutter. So since we don't have a traditional enough wire cutters to give everybody, I gave you 2 washers and a piece of fishing line. I don't have scissors with me at the moment, but you can cut this because you won't need this whole thing at once. You're going to need about half of it. So if you have a pair of scissors, you could certainly cut half of it. I'm going to cut the half of it later. So I'm going to take my washer, and put the fishing wire through it and tie a knot. This is going to be my second one, so I'm going to bring the knot over to here. And like I said, I will cut this piece off later. I don't have scissors with me down here, but I have scissors that I'll use later to cut off. So you're going to tie knots, multiple knots. I'm going to say go over and over and over about 3 or 4 times to make sure that this is nice and secure. I did give you twice as much fishing line as I think you're going to need. This way, in case it breaks, you'll have another piece to secure it back to use. So like I said, you will cut part of this off. I'm not going to do that for our purposes right now. So tie a bunch of knots in there, and then go to the other side. Tie the other washer on there. You need about this much space, so about an arm's length, maybe a little less than an arm's length, because this is going to be the tool that you use to cut your clay. I'm going to tie this on, and this is going to be your homemade wire cutter, or your homemade clay cutter, so you can cut your clay. So once this is tied on and secured, multiple times, 4 or 5 times, tie some knots in it. Cut off the excess pieces. Leave a little bit on there. Don't cut it off completely, just in case you need to retie it better. So tie. I will cut off this excess later, but for right now I can still use it to cut my clay. So I'm going to get my clay and bring it up here. I'm not sure if it's in the camera view, so I'm going to lift it up. My 25 pounds. I want just enough clay so that I can play around. So open that up. Use your wire cutter. Cut a little chunk of clay. You don't need a big chunk. Cut a chunk about that large. And then I'm going to cut this in half. So I have 2 pieces, a smaller piece and a larger piece. And then before I put this away, just take your finger and rub it along there to get that extra clay off. This way it's not a big dry clumpy mess later. Put that aside. Take your little piece of clay, wedge it a little bit between your hands. Always a good practice to recover up your clay. If you feel like your clay is drying out, feel free to add some water to it, but don't add too much water to it. I'm gonna put that out of my way. And then this is, I'm actually gonna take half of this because I wanna make 2 stamps. Just need a little piece. It fits in the palm of my hands. Just enough to make your stamp. So think about what the top of it's going to look like. Do you want it to be round? Do you want it to be square? All of yours are different. Do you want it to come in? I can play around with the handle part, but for now I want the canvas of it to be flat. So that's what I'm going to focus on, getting a nice surface so I can carve into it. And then if you don't already know what you're carving into it, you need to really kind of figure that out first. And then you need to play around with what tools you're going to use. If you want to, if you have a drawing and you want to put it on there and trace it, you could certainly do that. If you want to carve away, and I'm going to carve around and play with this, but I wanted to get you started so that you knew how to start it. I'm going to take some less of this because I don't need all that clay. That's the start of it. The next video will show the progression of my carving, because I'm going to let this dry for a few minutes. So I'm actually going to make 2 of them so that I have 2 surfaces, but I want it to dry a little bit before I start making it. So I'm going to make my nice handle on here, another circle. I want it to get a little bit dry, so I'm going to come back in a few minutes, and in the meantime I want to upload this video so you can start and you can make your wire tool today. So first make your wire tool, cut your clay, make sure you have a slip container, and then any extra clay, I just want to show you what to do. So I'm going to let that dry a little bit too. So this extra pieces of clay, I have a couple options. Because I need some slip, I am going to use the slip option, but because it still has plasticity, I can put it right back in my bag and reuse it. But because I want to make some slip, I'm going to break it up into little pieces, add some water to it, so little tiny chunks. Add a little water to it and put the lid back on. You don't want to do this every time because you don't need an excess amount of slip, but you will need a little bit of slip, and slip does take a couple of days to get set up. So even though I probably don't need this until well into next week, I'm going to put the lid on this and let this start disintegrating so that when I'm ready to have slip, I will have it. So make sure the lid is on. I'm going to put this aside. I'm going to wash my hands, and then in a few minutes I'm going to carve this. So that's the first steps for today.